I returned to Briar Glen expecting to mourn my mother, not to fight a war over the dirt she left behind. I thought grief would be the heaviest thing I carried, until I saw fresh survey stakes cutting through our 120 acres. My sister, Brooke, hadn't just misunderstood the will. She had forged a future where I didn't exist. She banked on my silence, forgetting that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes, it is just someone taking aim. The drive back to Briar Glen was a 3-hour lesson in how memory distorts distance. In my head, the stretch of highway between Chicago and the flat, open expanse of rural Illinois was a buffer zone, a long decompression chamber that separated my life as a graphic designer from my life as Alice Sanchez, the daughter who left. But in reality, the transition was abrupt. One minute I was navigating the tangled concrete arteries of the city, and the next, the skyline vanished in the rearview mirror, replaced by the relentless gray horizon of November cornfields stripped to the stalk. I was 33 years old, and I was driving home to bury the last parent I had. My mother, Elena, had passed away 4 days ago. The end had been a rapid decline, a sudden plunge after a year of slow fading that I had mostly witnessed through FaceTime screens and brief, guilty weekends where I slept in my childhood twin bed and pretended everything was fine. I had not been there for the final breath. My sister, Brooke, Brooke was always there. Brooke, who stayed. Brooke, who married a local man. Brooke, who turned the family narrative into a shrine to her own martyrdom. I pulled my rental car into the parking lot of Klein Mercer Legal Group. The building was a brick square that had housed the same 3 businesses since I was in kindergarten. The law firm, a dentist, and an insurance broker. The sky above was the color of a bruised plum, heavy with the threat of snow that hadn't quite committed to falling. Inside, the office smelled of stale coffee and lemon furniture polish. Mr. Mercer, a man whose skin seemed to hang off his bones like loose drapery, sat behind a mahogany desk that looked large enough to land a plane on. He stood when I entered, his hand papery and cool in mine. "I am sorry for your loss." "Alice," he said. His voice was a dry rattle. "Thank you." "Mr. Mercer," I said. I sat in one of the 2 leather client chairs. The leather was cracked, revealing yellow foam beneath. "We are just waiting on Brooke," he said, as if summoned by the mention of her name. The heavy oak door swung open. Brooke swept in, bringing a gust of cold air and the scent of expensive vanilla perfume with her. My sister was 36, 3 years my senior, but she carried herself with the poise of someone who had been the matriarch for decades. She wore a black wool coat that was tailored to within an inch of its life. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, glossy knot. "Alice," she breathed. She crossed the room in 2 strides and enveloped me in a hug. It felt performative, a gesture designed for an audience of one old lawyer. Her arms were stiff. "Hi, Brooke," I said, patting her back awkwardly before pulling away. She sat next to me, crossing her legs. She looked immaculate. I looked down at my own jeans and the sweater I had pulled out of a suitcase that morning. I felt the old, familiar shrinking sensation, the feeling of being the younger, messier sister. "Let us begin." "Mr. Mercer said, adjusting his spectacles. The reading of the will was a formality. I knew what it was supposed to say. Our father had died 10 years ago, leaving everything to Mom. Mom had always said, in her vague, gentle way, that she wanted everything split down the middle. Fairness was her religion. Mr. Mercer began to read. The language was dense, full of legal phrasing that seemed to strip the emotion out of death. Being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath, I listened, nodding along, until he reached the section regarding the real estate. To my daughters, Brooke Sanchez and Alice Sanchez, I leave the primary residence at 412 Oak Street, to be shared equally. Regarding the agricultural holdings. He paused to turn a page. I watched his hand. He frowned slightly, squinting at the document. The agricultural holdings, consisting of the parcels listed in Attachment A, are to be divided equally between the beneficiaries. He finished. He slid the document across the desk toward us so we could review the attachment. I leaned forward. The main body of the will was typed on thick, cream-colored paper in a standard Times New Roman font, likely drafted years ago. But attachment A, the list of land parcels, looked different. The paper was brighter, whiter, as if it had been pulled from a fresh ream. The font was slightly sharper, perhaps Arial or Calibri, and the alignment was off. The margins narrower than the previous pages. It looked like it had been typed yesterday. I ran my finger down the list, the house, the small rental property in town, and then the jewel of the estate, 120 acres of prime farmland just outside the city limits. Is this the original list? I asked. My voice sounded loud in the quiet room. Mr. Mercer blinked. It is the list that was in the file. Alice, why? It looks different. I said. I looked at Brooke. She was studying her fingernails, her face a mask of polite boredom. Brooke, does this look right to you? I asked. She looked up, her eyes wide and innocent. It looks like a list of land. Alice? Mom was constantly reorganizing her files in the last few months. She probably had it retyped so it was cleaner. She was very worried about making things easy for us. I looked back at the paper. It did not feel like Mom. Mom hoarded paper clips and wrote on the backs of envelopes. She did not retype legal addendums to make them look cleaner. Okay, Mr. Mercer said, sensing the tension. The next step is the probate process. It is standard. We need to get the ball rolling to ensure the assets are unfrozen and the estate can settle its debts. Brooke leaned forward, placing a manicured hand on the desk. Exactly. And Mr. Mercer, I was telling Alice earlier that we need to move fast. The property taxes on the farm are due in 2 months, and the estate account is practically empty. If we do not get the preliminary probate forms signed today, the penalties could bury us. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. Alice, I know you are grieving. I am too. But we cannot let the government take what Mom left us, because we were too slow. Just sign the preliminary forms so I can handle the administrative headache. You can go back to Chicago and I will deal with the mess. The urgency in her voice triggered a warning bell in the back of my mind. It was a specific tone I remembered from childhood. The tone she used when she had broken something and needed me to cover for her before Dad got home. I am not signing anything today. I said. Brooke's expression hardened for a fraction of a second before smoothing back into concern. Alice, do not be difficult. It is just standard paperwork. I want to read it all first. I said, I want to see the accounts myself. Mr. Mercer nodded slowly. That is your right. Alice, take the copies. We can reconvene on Monday. Brooke stood up abruptly. Fine. Monday. But you are putting us at risk. Alice, Mom would not have wanted us to squabble over technicalities. She walked out without hugging me this time. After the meeting, I needed air. I needed to see the land. The 120 acres were the only thing that felt real in a world that suddenly felt unstable. I drove out of town, the tires of the rental car crunching on the gravel roads. The farm was about 5 miles west of Briar Glen, a square of black earth that had been in the Sanchez family for 3 generations. We did not farm it ourselves anymore. We leased it to a local operation that grew soy and corn, but it was ours. It was the place where I had learned to drive a tractor, where I had hidden from Brooke during our teenage shouting matches, where Mom had walked every evening until her hips gave out. I pulled up to the access road and stopped. There was a gate. It was a new, heavy steel gate, painted a bright, aggressive yellow. A thick padlock hung from the latch. I frowned. We never locked the access road. The tenant farmers needed to get in and out with their equipment. I got out of the car and walked up to the gate. I tried the key on my keychain, the old brass key Mom had given me 10 years ago that opened the house and the old padlock on the barn. It did not fit. I rattled the gate. It held fast, looking past the bars. I scanned the field. The harvest was done, the ground chopped and brown. But something was wrong. Along the eastern edge of the property, near the tree line, I saw flashes of neon pink. I squinted. Survey stakes, fresh ones. They marched in a straight line across the acreage, cutting a geometric scar through the soil. "Hey, you lost?" I jumped and turned around. An old pickup truck had slowed to a crawl on the road behind me. The window rolled down with a screech of metal on metal, revealing the weathered face of Harold Wexler, our neighbor to the north. "Mr. Wexler," I said. "It is me, Alice." He squinted, then his face broke into a gap-toothed grin. "Alice Sanchez? Well, I will be. I have not seen you since you were knee-high. I heard about your mama. A damn shame. She was a good woman." "Thank you," I said. I pointed at the gate. "Do you know when this went up?" He looked at the gate and scratched his chin. "Couple of weeks ago, I reckon. Thought it was odd myself. Usually, that road is open for the combines, but I figured your sister knew what she was doing." "Brooke put this up?" I asked. "Must have. I have seen her out here quite a bit lately. Her in those suits." "Suits?" I asked, stepping closer to his truck. "Yeah, city types, driving shiny black SUVs, energy people, is what the talk is at the diner. Solar, maybe, or wind. They have been walking the property line with her for a month now." "A month? Mom was alive a month ago. She was in hospice care in the living room, barely conscious. But she was alive. Did Mom ever come out with them?" I asked. Harold shook his head. "No, hun, just Brooke. And that husband of hers. Sometimes. Looked like they were measuring for something big. Anyway, I best be going." "Good to see you, Alice." He drove off, leaving a cloud of dust that settled on my coat. I stood there for a long time, staring at the pink stakes. Brooke had been meeting developers while Mom was dying. She had been negotiating deals on land she did not yet fully own. I got back in the car. I was not going back to the house. I was going to the county seat. The Briar Glen County Records Office was in the basement of the courthouse, a room that smelled of old paper and bureaucratic indifference. I walked up to the counter. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes named Melanie, looked up from her phone. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to see the deed history for a property." I said, "The Sanchez farm. Parcel number." I fumbled for the paper Mr. Mercer had given me. Parcel 0429, Melanie typed into her computer. Her long acrylic nails clicked rhythmically on the keys. "Sanchez," she mumbled. "Here it is. What do you need?" "I want to see the most recent filing," I said. She hit a button, and the printer behind her whirred to life. She grabbed the sheet and slid it across the counter. "That will be $2 for the copy." I dug 2 single-dollar bills out of my purse and handed them to her, then looked at the document. It was a quitclaim deed. My breath hitched. A quitclaim deed is a fast, dirty way to transfer property. It offers no guarantees, no title search. It just says, "I give up my interest in this land." I scanned the document. The grantor was Alice Sanchez. The grantee was an entity called Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC. I looked at the date. August 14th, 3 months ago. I looked at the bottom of the page. There, on the signature line, was my name, Alice Sanchez. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the counter. The signature was looped and slanted. It looked like mine. If I were a stranger, I would believe it was mine. But I knew how I signed my name. I crossed my A's with a sharp, upward flick. This A was crossed with a flat, lazy line. And more importantly, on August 14th, I was in Chicago, presenting a branding strategy to a client in a glass-walled conference room. I had not been in Briar Glen. I had not signed this. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "Who filed this?" Melanie looked at the screen again. "Says here it was walked in. Counterfiling. Does it say who walked it in?" She shook her head. "No, just says fees were paid." I looked at the grantee address for Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC. It was a suite number on Wacker Drive in Chicago. I pulled out my phone and Googled the address. It was a UPS store, a mailbox. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not Mom retyping a list to be neat. This was theft. I walked out of the courthouse and sat in my car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I dialed the number for Klein Mercer. "Mr. Mercer, this is Alice," I said when he picked up. Alice? We just spoke. I am at the county records office. I said, I am looking at a quitclaim deed transferring my half of the farm to a company called Sanchez Ridge Holdings. It is dated 3 months ago. Did you prepare this? There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. I certainly did not. Mr. Mercer said. His voice was no longer dry. It was sharp. I have no record of any such entity. The will clearly states the land is in your mother's name. If that deed is valid, the land is not even part of the estate anymore. It is not valid. I said, I did not sign it. Alice, he said, his tone shifting to something like pity. Are you sure you did not? Perhaps forget? Your mother was ill. There was a lot of paperwork. I did not sign away $1 million worth of land and forget about it. Mr. Mercer, I snapped. I hung up. I did not want to talk to the lawyer anymore. I wanted to talk to my sister. Brooke lived in a subdivision called the Preserve, a collection of McMansions built on what used to be a wetland. Her house was a beige monolith with a 3-car garage and a lawn that looked like it had been manicured with scissors. I parked in the driveway and walked to the front door. I did not knock. I still had a key, theoretically, though I doubted it would work. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. Brooke, I called out. I walked into the kitchen. It was magazine-ready, white marble countertops, stainless steel appliances that looked unused, a bowl of lemons that I suspected were plastic. Brooke was standing by the island, pouring a glass of white wine. She jumped when she saw me. Alice, you should knock. I walked up to the island and slammed the copy of the quitclaim deed down on the marble. The paper made a sharp slap sound. What is this? I asked. Brooke looked at the paper, then at me. She took a sip of her wine, her hand perfectly steady. It is a deed. Alice. I know what it is. I want to know why my name is on it. I never signed this. She set the glass down. She sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a toddler. It was a temporary structure. Alice, the attorney recommended it, to protect the asset from probate taxes. It is complicated. Mr. Mercer just told me he didn't do it. I said, not Mercer, she said quickly. A specialist, a tax attorney in Chicago. Look, Alice, you were busy. You were working. Mom was sick. I had to make executive decisions to protect the family. That LLC is just a holding vehicle. It keeps the land safe until we decide what to do. By forging my signature? I asked. My voice rose. You forged my name. Brooke. That is a felony. Brooke's face changed. The warmth, the patience. It all evaporated. Her features seemed to sharpen. Her eyes turning into cold, hard stones. She straightened her spine, looming over the counter. Lower your voice, she hissed. She walked around the island until she was standing 2 feet from me. You want to talk about crimes? She said, her voice low and dangerous. How about the crime of abandoning your dying mother? How about the crime of leaving me to change her diapers and hold her hand while she screamed in pain, while you were busy playing artist in the city? I flinched. The words hit their mark. I came as much as I could. I whispered, it wasn't enough. Brooke said, everyone in Briar Glen knows it. They all know you left and never came back. They know I am the one who took care of her. And now you waltz in here, looking for a payout? Looking to check the paperwork? She laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. You have no idea what it takes to keep this family afloat. Alice, that land is the only thing of value we have left. And yes, I moved it. I moved it so we could leverage it, so we could actually pay the bills Mom left behind. If you challenge this filing, if you drag this into court, you will destroy what is left of this family. You will bankrupt the estate with legal fees. And for what? To prove a point? She leaned in closer. If you fight me on this, Alice, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of daughter you were. I will ruin you. I stared at her. I had known my sister could be mean. I had known she was manipulative, but I had never seen this. This was not just anger. This was calculation. She had practiced this speech. She had been waiting for me to find out. I grabbed the deed from the counter. I am not signing the probate forms. Brooke, I said, She smiled, a tight, thin smile. Take the weekend. Alice, think about it. Think about whether you want to be the villain in this town, because that is exactly what you will be. I drove to Mom's house. It was dark when I arrived. The house was a small, rambling ranch style that felt too big without her in it. I let myself in and turned on the kitchen light. The silence was deafening. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten breakfast before school for 18 years. I put my head in my hands. Was Brooke right? The guilt washed over me. Thick and suffocating. I had left. I had built a life in Chicago. I had justified it by saying I needed to work, that I couldn't move back to a town with no jobs in my field. But maybe that was just selfishness. Maybe I had let Brooke carry the burden, and now I had no right to question how she carried it. Maybe she really was just trying to save the estate. Maybe the forgery was a desperate act of a stressed caregiver, not a malicious theft. I looked around the kitchen. It was frozen in time. Mom's pill organizer was still on the counter. A stack of mail sat unopened. I stood up and walked to the drawer where she kept her tea. I needed something warm. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, amidst the boxes of Earl Grey and chamomile, was a small, spiral-bound notebook. It was the cheap kind you buy at a drugstore for $1. I recognized it. Mom used these to make grocery lists. I picked it up. My fingers brushed the cardboard cover. I opened it. The first few pages were standard. Milk, bread, eggs, stamps. I flipped further. The handwriting began to deteriorate. The letters became shaky, the lines uneven. This was from the last few months, when the Parkinson's and the cancer had started to wrestle for control of her body. I turned another page. There was no list, just a single sentence. Written in the center of the page in wobbly, frantic blue ink, "Do not let Brooke rush you." I stared at it. I turned the page. "Do not let Brooke rush you." And another. "Do not sign until you read. Do not let Brooke rush you." My heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel her fear in the jagged loops of the letters. Mom had known. In the fog of her illness, in the vulnerability of her final days, she had seen something in Brooke that terrified her. She had been trying to leave me a message, a warning in the only place she knew Brooke wouldn't look. The junk drawer. I traced the letters with my thumb. "Do not let Brooke rush you." The guilt that had been drowning me 10 minutes ago began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Brooke hadn't forged that deed to save the family. She hadn't put up that gate to protect the farm. She had done it because she wanted the money, and she thought I was too weak, too guilty, and too far away to stop her. She thought she could bully me with shame. She thought the threat of small-town gossip would make me fold. She was wrong. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my bag. Then I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark kitchen. I did not search for a local attorney. Mr. Mercer was nice, but he was out of his depth, and he was part of the Briar Glen ecosystem. I needed someone who didn't care about the local social hierarchy. I searched for property litigation attorney Alder Point. Alder Point was the city 40 minutes away, close enough to know the laws, far enough to be dangerous. One name kept coming up with 5-star reviews and words like bulldog and meticulous. Dana Hollis. I opened a new email draft. Subject: Estate fraud. Forgery inquiry. Alice Sanchez. Dear Ms. Hollis, my name is Alice Sanchez. I am currently in Briar Glen handling my late mother's estate. I have discovered a quitclaim deed filed 3 months ago transferring 120 acres of my family's land to an LLC I have never heard of. The deed bears my signature. I did not sign it. My sister is pressuring me to close probate immediately. I have reason to believe she is negotiating a sale or lease with an energy developer. I need to stop her. I am available to meet tomorrow. Sincerely, Alice Sanchez. I read it over once. Then I hit send. I sat back in the chair and listened to the wind rattling the window panes. I was alone in the house, but for the first time since I arrived, I didn't feel helpless. Brooke wanted a war. She had counted on a skirmish, a quick surrender. She had no idea what she had just started. I turned off the light, and waited for the morning. Alder Point was only 40 miles from Briar Glen, but it felt like a different century. Where my hometown was defined by its stagnation, the same crumbling brick facades, the same families holding the same grudges, Alder Point had glass buildings, a coffee shop that didn't serve diner mud, and most importantly, law firms that didn't play golf with my sister's husband. I parked my rental car in a garage that smelled of damp concrete and exhaust, clutching a manila folder to my chest like a shield. Inside were the copies of the quitclaim deed, my mother's will, and the strange, shaky note I had found in the kitchen drawer. Hollis Rourke Law was located on the 4th floor of a mid-rise building overlooking the river. The office was sleek, minimalist, and intimidating. It lacked the dusty, wood-paneled comfort of Mr. Mercer's office. And that was exactly why I was there. I didn't want comfort. I wanted competence. Dana Hollis was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with hair cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob and glasses that looked expensive. She didn't offer me a sympathetic smile when I sat down. She offered me a bottle of water and opened a notepad. "Tell me the facts." "Alice," she said, "leave the emotion out of it for a moment. We will get to the emotion later. Right now. I need the timeline." I laid it out for her. The date of the alleged signing, my location in Chicago at that time, the existence of the LLC, the fresh survey stakes, the pressure to close probate. Dana listened without interrupting, her pen scratching across the legal pad. When I finished, she picked up the copy of the quitclaim deed. She held it up to the light, then laid it flat, running her finger over the signature. "It is a good forgery," she said. Her voice was clinical. "But if what you are saying is true, it is a sloppy crime." "Sloppy?" I asked. "It feels pretty airtight to me. She has the land in a company I don't control. It is sloppy because she did it while your mother was still alive," Dana said. She tapped the paper. "This is dated August 14th. If she had waited until after your mother passed, she could have claimed it was part of an estate settlement strategy. By doing it before, she turned this into theft from a living person. That is elder abuse. Alice, that is fraud. And if she used the mail to file this, it is mail fraud." She looked at me, her eyes intense behind the lenses. "But we have a problem." "What problem?" I asked, feeling my stomach tighten. "The clock," she said. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, but perception is the other 10th, right now, on paper. This entity, Sanchez Ridge Holdings, owns the land. That means Brooke, acting as the manager of that LLC, can borrow against it. She can sign leases. She can enter into contracts that might be binding even if we later prove the deed was fraudulent." "She can sell it?" I asked. Dana shook her head. "Selling is harder. A title company would flag the recent transfer. But a lease? A solar option agreement? That is easier. And if she takes out a loan using the land as collateral and then spends that money, well, you can't get blood from a stone. If she liquidates the equity, winning the lawsuit might just get you a piece of barren land and a judgment against a sister who is bankrupt." I felt a wave of nausea. Brooke wasn't just stealing the land, she was hollowing it out. "So, what do we do?" I asked. Dana leaned back. "First, we stop being polite. I am going to order a forensic handwriting analysis immediately. We need an expert to go on record stating that is not your signature. Second, I need you to file a formal records request at the county. I want to know exactly who walked that deed into the office. The clerk told you it was a counterfiling?" "Yes." I said, "Then there is a log." Dana said, "Or security footage, or a receipt. Bureaucracy is a double-edged sword. It makes fraud easy to hide, but it also creates a paper trail that is impossible to fully erase." She paused, looking at the notebook I had placed on the desk, the one with Mom's shaky writing. "And Alice, you need to understand something." "What?" "This is going to get ugly. If we file a suit claiming fraud, we are accusing your sister of a felony. She will not react well. She will come for your reputation. She will try to paint you as the greedy, absent daughter who is jealous of the one who stayed behind. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the yellow gate. I thought about the fear in my mother's handwriting. "Do not let Brooke rush you. I am ready," I said. The drive back to Briar Glen felt like re-entering a combat zone where the enemy hadn't yet declared war, but was already digging trenches. I spent the afternoon in my hotel room. I refused to stay at the house alone again, doing the research I should have done years ago. I looked into Prairie Line Agri Group, the company where Brooke had worked for 8 years. On the surface, it was a standard agribusiness firm: fertilizer, seed, consulting. But as I dug into their recent press releases, a pattern emerged. Prairie Line had recently launched a land legacy division, specifically targeted at helping family farms transition into modern revenue streams. The buzzwords were thick: sustainable partnerships, solar integration, long-term yield. I found a press release from 2 months ago. Prairie Line Agri Group announces promotion of Brooke Sanchez to Director of Regional Acquisitions. Director. I stared at her headshot on the website. She looked capable, trustworthy, and fierce. The promotion coincided almost perfectly with the date on the quitclaim deed. My sister hadn't just stolen the land for the money. She had used our family heritage as a stepping stone. She had likely promised her bosses that she could deliver a prime, 120-acre parcel for their new solar partners. She was selling us out to secure her own corner office. That evening, I had to put on a dress and pretend to be a grieving sister. The memorial gathering was at St. Brigid's Community Hall. It wasn't the funeral, that was scheduled for Monday, but a celebration of life, organized by the church ladies. The hall smelled of industrial coffee, lilacs, and ham sandwiches. The room was full. My mother had been a teacher for 30 years. She had taught half the town to read. People swarmed the entrance, offering hugs that felt like suffocating blankets. Brooke was already there, of course. She stood near the front, flanked by her husband, Evan, and a tight circle of her friends. She looked devastatingly elegant in a charcoal dress, her eyes appropriately red-rimmed, but her makeup flawless. I watched her from the back of the room near the coffee urns. It was a masterclass in social engineering. She held hands. She nodded solemnly. She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief at the perfect moments. I took a deep breath and waded into the crowd. Alice. "Oh, honey, look at you." It was Mrs. Gable, the choir director. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of mothballs. "We were so worried you wouldn't make it in time." I smiled, my face aching. "I wouldn't miss this." Mrs. Gable. "Well, Brooke said you were having such a hard time getting away from work." She whispered loud enough for 3 other women to hear. "She said things have been chaotic for you in the city." I stiffened. Chaotic. That was the word Brooke had chosen. "Work is busy," I said smoothly, "but family comes first." Mrs. Gable patted my cheek. "Of course, dear. It is just, well, after the divorce, we all worry. Brooke mentioned you have been struggling to find your footing. It is good you are here. Maybe being home will help you stabilize." I felt the blood drain from my face. My divorce was 3 years ago. It had been amicable. I owned my own condo. I had a senior position at my firm. I was not struggling to find my footing, but that was the narrative Brooke had planted. Alice the unstable one, Alice the mess, Alice who couldn't be trusted with a legacy because she couldn't even keep a husband. I looked across the room. Brooke caught my eye. She didn't smile. She just gave me a small, sad nod, as if confirming to everyone watching that she was the strong one holding me up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand on a chair and tell them she was a thief, but I heard Dana's voice in my head. Strategic, quiet, I swallowed my rage down with a sip of lukewarm coffee. I played the part. I accepted the condolences. I let them pity me, because if they thought I was weak, they wouldn't see me coming. The next morning, Monday, I was waiting at the doors of the county records office when they unlocked at 8 o'clock. Melanie Cross, the clerk I had spoken to before, was at her desk. She looked up and saw me, and her eyes darted to the side, checking if her supervisor was around. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice low. "I need to file a formal Freedom of Information request regarding the filing of that deed." Melanie hesitated. She looked nervous. Her fingers twisted a paperclip on her desk. "You can file it," she said softly, "but it takes 10 days to process. I don't have 10 days. Melanie," she looked around again. The office was empty except for us, and an older man in the back scanning microfiche. "Look," she whispered, "I shouldn't tell you this. I could get fired." "Tell me what?" I leaned in, resting my elbows on the high counter. "I remembered that filing," she said. "It stuck out because usually the lawyers send runners, or the landowners come in themselves. This was different. Different how? It was a courier service from the city, but not one of the regular ones. A guy in a leather jacket. He paid the recording fees in cash. Crisp hundreds. We usually take checks or cards." "Cash?" I asked. That was unusual for a real estate transaction. "Yeah, and he asked for Brooke specifically." "He asked for Brooke?" I frowned. "Why would he ask for her here?" "Not here," Melanie said. "He asked if the notification of recording would go to Brooke Sanchez. He checked the address on the form 3 times to make sure it was going to that Chicago mailbox, not the house in town. He said, the lady was very specific that nothing goes to the house. I felt a chill. The lady, did you get the courier company's name?" I asked. Melanie shook her head. "No, it was just a guy. But," she glanced at the security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. "The system keeps footage for 90 days. If you file that request specifically asking for video from August 14th between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, you might get a face. Thank you." "Melanie," I said, "I truly mean that." She pushed a form toward me. "Just fill it out. And please, don't tell anyone I said anything. My supervisor. He plays tennis with your sister." I froze. The supervisor. Of course. The small-town web was sticky and wide. I filled out the form, my hand shaking slightly. I handed it back to her, and she stamped it with a loud thud that echoed in the quiet room. I was eating a sandwich in my car, staring at the gray water of the river. When my phone buzzed, it was Dana. "Alice, are you sitting down?" "I am," I said. "What did you find?" "I ran a lien search," she said. "I wanted to see if there was any activity on the property title aside from the transfer, and there is a UCC filing recorded 4 weeks ago. Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC opened a commercial line of credit with Northcrest Community Bank." "How much?" I asked, closing my eyes. $200,000, Dana said. "And Alice, the collateral listed is the crops and future lease revenues of the property. $200,000. In 1 month. Where's the money?" I asked. "That is the question." Dana said, "If she moved it out of the LLC account, tracking it becomes a nightmare. But this confirms the urgency. She isn't just sitting on the land. She is leveraging it. She needs cash. Fast. Do you know why?" "No." I said, "Brooke and Evan both have good jobs. They live in a big house. They shouldn't be desperate for cash. People live loud and bleed quiet." Dana said, "You need to go to that bank. You are not a signatory on the account, so they won't show you statements. But if you walk in there and start asking questions about the land, watch how they react. Northcrest is a small bank. If they think their collateral is entangled in a fraud case, they might get spooked and freeze the funds. I will go now." I said, "Be careful. Alice, if you poke the bear, it wakes up." Northcrest Community Bank was built to look like a colonial mansion. All red brick and white pillars, it projected stability and tradition. I walked in, my heart hammering against my ribs. I asked to speak to a loan officer. A young woman directed me to a glass-walled office in the back. The nameplate on the door said Robert Halloway, Senior Vice President. I knocked and entered. Robert Halloway was a man in his 50s with a tan that came from a tanning bed and a suit that was slightly too shiny. He smiled when I walked in, but the smile faltered when I introduced myself. "Alice Sanchez," I said. "Elena Sanchez's daughter." "Ah, yes. Condolences," he said, not standing up. "What can I do for you?" "I am inquiring about a line of credit taken out against my family's property." I said, "The 120 acres on County Road 9. His face went blank. A professional shudder coming down. I cannot discuss client accounts with non-signatories. Ms. Sanchez, I am a beneficiary of the estate that owns that land, I said, keeping my voice steady, and I have reason to believe the deed used to secure that loan was fraudulent. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Holloway leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. That is a very serious accusation. It is a serious situation, I countered. I am letting you know that the title is in dispute. If you continue to disperse funds based on that collateral, the bank could be liable. Holloway stood up. He was not smiling at all now. Ms. Sanchez, our legal department vets all applications thoroughly. If you have a dispute with your sister, I suggest you handle it in family court, not in my office. Now, I have a meeting. He walked to the door and held it open. It was a dismissal. I walked out, feeling the eyes of every teller on my back. I felt small. I felt like the crazy sister Brooke had warned everyone about. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and out into the biting November wind. I marched toward my car, tears stinging my eyes. I was failing. I was making noise, but I wasn't stopping anything. Ms. Sanchez, I turned. A man was jogging after me. He was young, maybe 25, wearing a bank name tag that said Justin. He looked terrified. He stopped a few feet away, checking to make sure no one was watching from the windows. I can't talk long, he said, his voice a hushed rush. But I heard you in there. I waited. Mr. Holloway? He and your sister. They go way back, Justin said, and her husband. They have these dinners. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I saw the file, he said. They pushed that loan through in 24 hours. Usually, a commercial line takes 2 weeks. They waived the appraisal because Holloway said he knew the value personally. He took a step closer. Brooke has friends, Ms. Sanchez, real friends, the kind that make things happen. If I were you, I would take whatever settlement she offers. You aren't just fighting her. You are fighting the way this town works. He glanced at the bank doors, then turned and hurried back inside. I stood in the parking lot, the wind whipping my hair across my face. Rage and grief swirled inside me. A toxic cocktail. I wanted to burn it all down. I wanted to storm back in there and scream. But I also wanted to curl up in my mother's bed and pretend none of this was happening. I wasn't a fighter. I was a graphic designer who liked jazz records and quiet Sundays. I didn't know how to fight banks and clerks and sisters who forged signatures. I got in the car and screamed. It was a guttural, raw sound that scraped my throat. I screamed until my lungs burned. Then, I started the engine. That night, the house was silent. The funeral was tomorrow. I should have been writing a eulogy. Instead, I was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes of Mom's old paperwork. I was looking for something, anything that proved Mom's intent. I found tax returns. I found recipes. I found Christmas cards from 1998. And then, I found her iPad. It was an old model, tucked between cushions on the sofa. I plugged it in and waited for the battery to charge. When it booted up, I guessed the passcode on the first try. My birthday. I opened her email. Mom wasn't very tech-savvy. Her inbox was full of spam and chain emails from her friends. But I searched for Brooke. Hundreds of results. Mostly mundane. Dinner Sunday. Pick up milk. But then I saw a thread from July, 4 months ago. Subject: please stop. I opened it. Brooke. Mom had written, I am tired. Please stop bringing those papers over. I told you I want the land to stay in the family. For both of you. I do not understand these companies you are talking about. I just want to rest. Please let me rest. My heart broke reading it. She sounded so small, so exhausted. I scrolled down to see Brooke's reply. It wasn't a long explanation. It wasn't an apology. It was sent 2 hours later. Mom, you are confused. We discussed this. It is for your protection. If you won't cooperate, I'll handle it. I'll handle it. I stared at the screen. The date on the email was July 28th. The quitclaim deed was dated August 14th. 2 weeks later, Brooke had tried to bully Mom into signing. Mom had refused. So Brooke had handled it. She had decided that Mom's no was just an obstacle to be circumvented. She had decided that her desire for the land outweighed our mother's right to her own property, her own legacy, and her own peace of mind in her final days. This wasn't just greed, this was a violation. I took a screenshot of the email, then I emailed it to Dana. I sat there in the dark, the iPad glowing on my lap. The rage was still there. But it had changed. It was no longer hot and chaotic. It had cooled into something hard and dense, like iron. Brooke had friends. She had the bank. She had the reputation. She had the supervisor at the records office. She had the narrative, but she had left trails. She had been arrogant. She thought I was unstable. She thought I would take the settlement and run back to Chicago because I was afraid of a fight. I wasn't going to scream anymore. I wasn't going to make scenes in banks. I was going to be the sister she didn't think existed. I was going to be patient. I was going to let her think she was winning. I was going to let her spend that money. I was going to let her dig the hole so deep that when the walls finally collapsed, she wouldn't be able to climb out. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. "Okay, Brooke," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to handle it? Let's handle it." I went to the desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I began to write down names. Melanie Cross, Justin at the bank, Harold Wexler, the courier. I was building my own map of Briar Glen, and I wasn't leaving until I burned her map to ash. The legal system in Lark County moved with the slow, grinding indifference of a glacier. But Dana Hollis knew how to use an ice pick. On Tuesday morning, Dana filed an emergency petition in probate court. It was a calculated strike, a temporary restraining order designed to freeze all assets related to the estate of Elena Sanchez, specifically targeting the 120 acres held by Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC. The motion argued that the title was in dispute due to credible allegations of fraud, and that any further encumbrance of the property, like the bank loan Brooke had already secured, would cause irreparable harm to the rightful heir. I expected Brooke to be angry. I expected a phone call, perhaps a screaming match in the driveway of our mother's house. I was prepared for noise. I was not prepared for the silence, nor for the paper that arrived by courier the next afternoon. Brooke did not call. She filed a counter-motion. I sat in Dana's office, reading the document. The text was dry, legalistic, and devastating. Brooke's attorney, a man named Marcus Thorne, who was known for his aggressive divorce tactics, had painted a portrait of me that was unrecognizable and yet terrifyingly plausible to an outsider. The respondent asserts that the petitioner, Alice Sanchez, is acting out of grief-induced instability and financial desperation. The motion read, Ms. Sanchez has a history of erratic behavior following her own marital dissolution. The petitioner has been absent from the decedent's life for years and is now attempting to disrupt the orderly administration of the estate to extort funds for personal debts. I looked up at Dana. My hands were shaking. "She is saying I am crazy," I said. "She is saying I am doing this because I am broke and unstable. It is a standard tactic." "Alice," Dana said, though her expression was grim, "discredit the source. If she can convince the judge that you are a loose cannon, then your claims about forgery look like the delusions of a desperate woman. She is using my divorce," I said. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I got divorced 3 years ago. It was sad. But it wasn't a mental breakdown. I went to therapy for 6 months. I moved on. Dana nodded. And she is weaponizing that. She is taking the fact that you sought help and twisting it into a diagnosis of incompetence. She is trying to make this about character, not handwriting. I looked out the window at the gray skyline of Alder Point. I realized then that Brooke wasn't just trying to win a legal battle. She was trying to erase me. She needed me to be the villain so she could remain the saint who cared for Mom. If I was the unstable, greedy sister, then her theft became a necessary act of protection. "We need to hit back with facts," Dana said, "and we have one." She slid a thick envelope across the desk. The forensic report came in this morning. I opened it. The report was from a document examiner in Chicago, a man with 40 years of experience testifying in federal court. I skipped the technical jargon about pen pressure and stroke velocity and went straight to the conclusion. Opinion. Highly probable simulation. The questioned signature on the quitclaim deed, dated August 14th, exhibits significant tremors and hesitation marks, consistent with a slowly executed simulation, tracing. The fluency of the writing does not match the known exemplars of Alice Sanchez. Furthermore, the signature lacks the microscopic feathering associated with rapid, natural writing. It is the professional opinion of this examiner that the signature is not genuine. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She traced it. I whispered. Dana tapped the page. It is a good trace. To a clerk at a counter. It looks fine. But under a microscope? It is a drawing, not a signature. This is our shield. Alice. She can call you crazy all she wants, but she cannot argue with ink density. I returned to Briar Glen with the report in my bag, feeling a temporary surge of confidence. But the town had a way of suffocating hope. I went to the local coffee shop, The Grind, to get a latte and use the Wi-Fi. The moment I walked in, the conversation at the counter stopped. Two women I recognized from high school were standing by the register. They looked at me, then looked away, whispering something to the barista. I walked up to the counter. The barista, a girl who usually smiled, would not meet my eyes. Just a black coffee. Please, I said. $3. She mumbled. As I waited, I heard one of the women whisper, shouting at the bank, threatened to sue the whole family. I took my coffee and walked out. The air outside was biting cold. Brooke had been busy. The narrative was already out there. Alice the unstable one. Alice who came back to grab the cash and run. Alice who was harassing her grieving sister. I felt a sudden, sharp paranoia. Every person I passed on the street seemed to be looking at me with suspicion. The isolation was physical. I was staying in my mother's house, sleeping in my childhood bed. But I was an exile in my own hometown. I needed groceries. I had been living on takeout and stale crackers from Mom's pantry. I drove to the supermart on the edge of town, hoping the anonymity of the aisles would offer some protection. I was in the dairy section, staring at a carton of almond milk. When I saw him, Evan, Brooke's husband, was standing by the yogurts, staring blankly at the shelf. He looked terrible. Evan had always been a handsome man, a former college football player with a broad smile and an easygoing manner. Now, he looked gray. His shoulders were slumped, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. I debated turning around, but I couldn't. He was part of this. Evan, I said. He jumped, nearly dropping a container of Greek yogurt. He spun around, his eyes wide. When he saw it was me, he didn't smile. He flinched. It was a small, involuntary movement, like a dog expecting to be kicked. Alice, he said. His voice was hoarse. How are you? I asked. He let out a short, nervous laugh. Oh, you know, surviving. It has been a long week. He looked at his cart. It was full of wine, bottles of expensive Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio, and frozen pizzas. Evan, I said, stepping closer, we need to talk about the land. He took a step back, his back hitting the refrigerated display. I cannot talk about that. Alice, Brooke said. Legal counsel said I shouldn't speak to you without a lawyer present. He looked terrified, not of me, but of the situation. Evan, I said, keeping my voice low. I know about the loan. I know about the forged deed. The forensic report came back today. It proves the signature is fake. His face went pale. The report? Yes, it is a felony. Evan, fraud, forgery. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I didn't know. He whispered, I didn't know the details. Brooke just said she was handling the estate planning. She said it was to save on taxes. She handed me papers to sign for the LLC, and I signed them. I trust my wife. Do you? I asked. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw a deep, exhausting misery in his eyes. She is under a lot of pressure. Alice, he said, his voice pleading. Prairie Line. They expect results. She has been working 18-hour days. She is just trying to secure our future. By stealing mine? I asked. Evan looked down at his shoes. It is not that simple. Nothing is that simple. He looked up, checking the aisle to see if anyone was watching. "You should stop. Alice, please, just take the settlement she offers. If you push this, it is going to break everything. It is already broken." "Evan." He stared at me for a moment longer, then grabbed his cart and pushed past me, the wheels rattling on the linoleum. I watched him go. He wasn't a villain. He was a coward, and cowards were dangerous because they would do anything to avoid confrontation. But he had given me a clue. Prairie line. They expect results. I called Dana from the car. Evan mentioned Prairie line again. I said, "He acted like Brooke is under the gun at work." Dana hummed on the other end of the line. "That tracks with what I found an hour ago." I pulled the formation documents for Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC from the Secretary of State's database, and Brooke is listed as the manager, but she is not the organizer. The person who actually filed the paperwork is named Kendra Voss. The name sounded familiar. Kendra Voss. I repeated. I think she is in some of Mom's Facebook photos. She works with Brooke. I checked LinkedIn while Dana stayed on the line. Kendra Voss, Executive Assistant to the Director of Regional Acquisitions, Prairie Line Agri Group. She is Brooke's assistant. I said, "So Brooke had her subordinate set up the shell company." Dana said, "That ties her professional life directly to the fraud." But why? Why involve a coworker in a personal family theft? Unless it is not personal, unless it is professional. I thought about the yellow gate, the energy people Harold Wexler had seen. "I am going to check the County Planning Commission." I said, "If there is a development deal, there has to be a permit application or a zoning inquiry." I hung up and drove to the library. I didn't want to go back to the county records office yet. I needed a neutral space. I used the public computer to access the county's online portal for pending land use applications. I searched for Sanchez. Nothing. I searched for Sanchez Ridge Holdings. Nothing. Then I searched for Prairie Line. A list of results populated. Most were for grain silos or irrigation permits, but one caught my eye. It was a memorandum of option, filed 6 weeks ago. The applicant wasn't Prairie Line, it was Sunvale Renewables, but the memorandum referenced a master lease agreement, coordinated by Prairie Line Agri Group, and under the list of affected parcels, I saw a string of numbers. I cross-referenced them with my mother's land. There it was, parcel 0429. I clicked on the document. It was redacted, but the summary was clear. Sunvale Renewables was securing options for a 4,000-acre solar farm. They needed contiguous land. I read the fine print. Landowner signing bonus. Owners who deliver clean title and signed lease agreements by December 31st shall receive a one-time execution payment of $50,000, in addition to the annual lease payments, $50,000, and the annual lease payments for solar could be upwards of $1,000 an acre. That was $120,000 a year. Brooke wasn't just stealing the land. She was securing a revenue stream that would make her rich, and she was doing it to hit a deadline, December 31st. That was why she needed the probate closed now. That was why she had forged the deed in August. She needed to show Sunvale that she controlled the land so she could sign the lease and get the bonus. If I fought her in probate court, the title would be clouded. Sunvale would walk away. She would lose the bonus, the lease, and probably her promotion. She was leveraged to the hilt. I sat back in the library chair. The silence of the room felt heavy. I thought of my mother. Mom had died on November 11th. Brooke had been negotiating this deal in August. I felt a sudden, sickening realization. I pulled the notebook with Mom's shaky handwriting out of my purse. "Do not let Brooke rush you." I thought about the last time I had visited, in late September. Mom had been groggy, heavily medicated on morphine for the pain. Brooke had been there, hovering. There had been 2 women with her. I had assumed they were church friends. I went back to the iPad screenshots I had taken. I looked at the digital copy of the healthcare power of attorney Brooke had tried to get Mom to sign, the one Mom had refused. I looked at the witness lines on that rejected document. Witness 1, Kendra Voss. Witness 2, Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller was Brooke's college roommate. I closed my eyes. They had surrounded her. Brooke had brought her assistant and her best friend into our dying mother's home to pressure her into signing documents while she was high on morphine. They had tried to corner a woman who could barely lift a spoon, and when Mom refused, when she held on to that last shred of autonomy, Brooke had simply waited until she was asleep. Or until I was gone, and forged the deed anyway. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It wasn't just business. It was a complete lack of humanity. Brooke looked at our mother and saw an obstacle. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I was done crying. I needed to nail the coffin shut. I had the forensic report. I had the motive. I had the LLC connection. But I needed to prove the mechanics of the crime. I needed to show exactly how that deed got into the official record. I went back to the county records office on Thursday. I waited until lunchtime, hoping Melanie Cross would be alone. She was eating a salad at her desk, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she stiffened. "I told you to file the request," she whispered. "I did." I said, "But I need to know something." "Melanie, the supervisor you mentioned, the one who plays tennis with Brooke. What is his name?" Melanie looked around. "Gary," she said. "Gary Thorne." "Thorne?" I asked. "Related to Marcus Thorne?" "Her brother," Melanie said. "Marcus is the lawyer. Gary runs this office." The web tightened. Brooke's lawyer was the brother of the man who accepted the forged deed. "Melanie," I said, "I know you are scared. I know this is a small town, but they are going to say I am crazy. They are going to say I am lying. I need that footage." Melanie bit her lip. She looked at the security camera, then down at her computer. "I can't give you the video file," she said. "I don't have access to export it. Only Gary does." I felt my heart sink. "But," she said, her voice barely audible, "I took a picture." "What?" "On the day you came in. After you left." I went back and looked at the footage on the server. I found the timestamp. August 14th, 1:42 p.m. I took a picture of the screen with my phone, just in case. She swiped on her phone and turned the screen toward me. It was grainy. A photo of a computer monitor. But the image was clear enough. A man in a leather jacket stood at the counter. He was handing a document to a man in a blue button-down shirt. The man in the blue shirt was laughing, accepting a thick white envelope along with the document. "That is Gary," Melanie said, pointing to the man in blue. "And that is the courier. See the envelope? Cash," I said. Melanie nodded. Gary bypassed the queue. He scanned it himself. He didn't even check the ID. "Can you send that to me?" I asked. Melanie pulled the phone back. "If I send it, it can be traced to me." I pulled a burner phone out of my pocket. I had bought it at the gas station that morning, paranoid that Brooke might be monitoring my family plan. "Send it to this number." I said, "It is anonymous. I swear. Melanie, I will never say where I got it. I will say it was mailed to me anonymously." She hesitated for a long, agonizing second. Then she typed in the number and hit send. My burner phone buzzed. "Thank you," I said. "You just saved me." She looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "Just win. Alice, I am tired of guys like Gary running everything." I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, looking at the photo. I had everything. I could go to the judge now. Dana could present this. We could get the deed voided. We could win the land back. But as I looked at Gary Thorne laughing while he took a bribe to steal my inheritance, I realized that winning the land wasn't enough. If I just won the civil case, Brooke would settle. She would pay a fine. She would keep her job because the fraud would be sealed in a settlement agreement. Gary would keep running the records office. The bank would sweep the loan under the rug. Everything would go back to normal. Brooke would still be the pillar of the community, and I would still be the unstable sister who caused a fuss. Brooke would learn nothing. She would just be more careful next time. I thought about Mom's note. "Do not let Brooke rush you." Mom didn't just want me to keep the land. She wanted me to stand up. I made a decision. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to keep this in the quiet, polite confines of probate court. I was going to burn the whole network down. I started the car and drove to the other side of town. to a small storefront that housed the Briar Glen Sentinel. It was a dying paper, mostly filled with high school sports scores and advertisements for used cars. But there was one reporter who still acted like journalism mattered: Talia Reid. I had read her byline. She had written a series of articles last year about water contamination that the city council had tried to bury. She was sharp, cynical, and an outsider. I walked into the office. The bell above the door jingled. The newsroom was empty except for a woman sitting at a messy desk in the corner, typing furiously on a laptop covered in stickers. She looked up. She had messy dark hair and eyes that looked like they had seen too much small-town nonsense. "Can I help you?" she asked. "My name is Alice Sanchez," I said. She stopped typing. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "The sister," she said. "I heard you were in town. I heard you were having a hard time." I walked over to her desk and placed the forensic report on top of a stack of papers. Then I placed the photo of the courier and Gary Thorne next to it. Finally, I laid down the printout of the Sunvale solar lease terms. "I am not having a hard time," I said. "I am having a realization." Talia picked up the photo. She squinted at it. "Is that Gary Thorne taking a bribe?" I sat down in the chair opposite her. "I have a story for you, Talia. It involves forgery, elder abuse, bank fraud, and a renewable energy deal that is being built on stolen land. It involves the county clerk, a prominent attorney, and the director of acquisitions at Prairie Line Agri Group." Talia's eyes widened. She picked up a pen. "I am listening. I am not asking you to publish yet." I said, "I need to let the trap snap shut in court first, but I want to give you everything. I want you to verify it. I want you to be ready, because when I walk out of that courtroom, I want the truth to be in print before my sister can spin it." Talia smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "Start from the beginning," she said. I took a deep breath. "It started with a yellow gate," I said, and then I told her everything. The courtroom in the Lark County Courthouse was a theater designed for a specific kind of play, one where the script was written by local history and the actors were cast by their last names. The air smelled of lemon oil and old dust, a scent that tried to mask the decay of a legal system running on favors and handshakes. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Dana. My hands were folded in my lap, perfectly still. I had chosen my outfit carefully: a navy blazer, a white blouse, dark slacks. I wore no jewelry except for a small watch. I looked professional. I looked boring. I looked sane. Across the aisle, Brooke was performing the role of a lifetime. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a black dress, a sartorial choice that screamed grieving but holding it together. Her hair was looser than usual, softening her face. She sat with her posture slightly slumped, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue every time the judge looked her way. Her attorney, Marcus Thorne, was a man who occupied space aggressively. He had a voice that boomed, designed to intimidate. "Your Honor," Thorne said, leaning onto the podium, "this petition is nothing more than a harassment campaign. Ms. Sanchez," he gestured vaguely at me without looking, "has returned to Briar Glen in a state of financial and emotional distress. She is lashing out at the only stable member of this family, my client. Brooke Sanchez has been the sole caregiver, the executor, and the bedrock of this estate. To freeze these assets based on a wild accusation of forgery is to punish the responsible sister for the erratic behavior of the absent one." I felt the eyes of the room on me, the bailiff, the court reporter, the few bored locals in the gallery. They were waiting for the outburst. They had heard the rumors Brooke had planted, that I was unstable, that I was broke, that I was jealous. They expected me to jump up, to scream, to cry, to prove Marcus Thorne right. I did nothing. I kept my chin up. I breathed in for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. I looked at the judge, Judge Vance, with a calm, attentive expression. This silence was a weapon Dana had coached me on. In a small town, she had said, hysteria confirms the gossip. Silence makes them nervous. I could see it working. Judge Vance, a man with a comb-over and a perpetually weary expression, shifted in his seat. He looked from the weeping Brooke to the stoic me. The contrast didn't fit the narrative. If I was the crazy one, why was I the only one sitting still? "Ms. Hollis," the judge said, "your response?" Dana stood up. She didn't boom. She spoke with a quiet, razor-sharp precision. "Your Honor, we are not asking the court to decide on the forgery today. We are simply asking to preserve the asset until the evidence can be heard. We have submitted a forensic handwriting analysis from a court-certified expert, stating it is highly probable the signature on the deed is a simulation. That alone is sufficient cause to pause any financial encumbrances on the property." Thorne scoffed. "A theatrical sound. An out-of-town expert hired by the plaintiff." "An expert," Dana countered smoothly, "whose testimony has been accepted in federal court, unlike the notary who supposedly witnessed this deed, who, if I am not mistaken, is the sister of Mr. Thorne's paralegal." The air in the room tightened. That was a warning shot. Dana was signaling that we knew the web, and we were ready to pull on the strings. Judge Vance cleared his throat. He didn't like this. He didn't like outsiders coming in and pointing out the incestuous nature of his jurisdiction, but he also didn't want a messy appeal on his record. "I am granting the temporary injunction," he said, banging his gavel without enthusiasm. "The assets of Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC are frozen pending a full hearing, and regarding the subpoena for the bank records." He paused, looking at a motion on his desk. "Northcrest Community Bank has filed an objection, claiming privacy concerns," he said. "They are protecting a fraud." Dana said, "They are protecting their client." Thorne snapped, "I will allow a limited disclosure." The judge ruled, "Transactions related specifically to the line of credit secured by parcel 0429. I want to see where that money went. If it went to estate maintenance, as Ms. Brooke Sanchez claims, there is no issue. If it went elsewhere, well, that is material." Brooke stopped crying instantly. Her head snapped up. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw the flash of genuine panic in her eyes. She whispered something frantic to Thorne. Thorne tried to argue, "Your Honor, this is an invasion of—" "It is an order. Mr. Thorne, move along." As we packed up, Brooke walked past our table. She didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead. Her jaw set so hard I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. She radiated a cold, vibrating fury. I didn't say a word. I just watched her go. 2 days later, the bank records arrived at Dana's office. We sat at her conference table. The pages spread out between us. Outside, the sky was a relentless, slate gray, threatening snow that would cover the brown fields. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed over the autopsy of my sister's life. I had expected to see transfers to business accounts. I had expected to see payments to contractors for the farm, or maybe even transfers to offshore accounts if she was truly sophisticated. What I saw was far more pathetic and far more dangerous. Brooke was drowning. "This isn't an investment strategy," Dana said, tapping a line item. "This is a lifestyle bailout." I followed her finger. October 2nd, $12,000 to Castle Rock Custom Cabinetry. October 5th, $8,000 to Mercedes-Benz Financial. October 10th, $5,000 to the Briar Glen Country Club. Past due dues. October 15th, $15,000 to American Express. The list went on. Designer furniture. Landscaping for her home in the preserve. A consulting fee paid to a shell company that dissolved 2 days later. She is living paycheck to paycheck. I said, stunned, but at a level of spending that requires 10 times her salary. Dana nodded. She has been floating it, probably using credit cards to pay other credit cards. But the music was about to stop. That is why she needed the land. That is why she needed the loan. I looked at the total amount drawn from the line of credit. $180,000 in 6 weeks. It was almost all gone. She burned through the equity of our mother's farm to renovate her kitchen and pay off her credit cards. I said, my voice was hollow, "She stole my inheritance to keep up appearances. It is worse than that." Dana said, "Look at this transfer here." She pointed to a transaction from 3 weeks ago. November 1st. $10,000 to K. Voss, Kendra Voss. I said, her assistant, the one who organized the LLC, and the one who witnessed the failed power of attorney. Dana added, that is a payoff. Alice, she is paying hush money to her subordinate. I felt sick. I thought about Brooke at the memorial service, looking so polished, so superior. I thought about her lecture in her kitchen, telling me I would destroy the family. She wasn't protecting the family name. She was protecting a house of cards that was built on debt and deceit. She was terrified that if anyone looked too closely, they would see that the successful executive was actually a broke fraudster. The leverage makes her dangerous, Dana said. Leaning back, a desperate person does not act rationally. She knows this bank record is going to come out in the next hearing. She knows she is cornered. Watch your back. Alice, I didn't go back to Briar Glen immediately. I needed to talk to Talia Reed. I met the reporter at a roadside diner halfway between the city and the town. It was the kind of place where truckers ate pie at 3 p.m. We sat in a booth with red vinyl seats that were cracked and taped over. Talia looked at the copies of the bank records I slid across the table. She whistled low. Granite countertops and hush money, she said. The American dream. Is this enough? I asked. Can you publish this? Talia swirled her coffee. I could. It is public record now that it has been disclosed in court. But if I publish this today, she spins it. She says it was reimbursement for personal funds used to care for the decedent. She muddies the water. She says you are leaking selective documents to smear her. She looked at me, her dark eyes sharp. You want to kill the king. Alice, you do not stab him in the leg. You wait until you can take the head. What are we waiting for? I asked. The link, Talia said. We have the theft. We have the spending. But we need the collusion. We need to prove that Prairie Line and Sunvale knew. Because right now, Brooke is the fall guy. If this blows up, Prairie Line will cut her loose, claim they knew nothing about the fraud, and walk away. Brooke goes down. But the system that created her stays intact. She leaned in. I have been digging into other land deals in Lark County. There is a pattern. Sunvale has acquired 4,000 acres in the last year. In almost every case, there was a probate issue that was miraculously resolved just in time for the signing bonus. They have a fixer. I said, exactly. Brooke isn't the mastermind. She is just the local hungry enough to do the dirty work. If you want to really win, if you want to make sure she can't hurt anyone else, you need to prove she was acting on orders. The proof came 2 days later. Dana's investigator, a man named Miller who worked entirely digitally, sent us a file. He had managed to scrape metadata and recover deleted emails from a server that Kendra Voss had foolishly used for personal correspondence. It was an email chain. The subject line was, Sanchez Parcel, timing. The participants were Brooke Sanchez, Kendra Voss, and a man named Greg Prentice. I recognized the name Prentice. He was the regional liaison for Sunvale Renewables. I read the email from Prentice, dated August 10th, 4 days before the forgery. Brooke, we are getting close to the wire on the Phase 1 alignment. We need the Sanchez parcel to lock in the grid connection. If we have to wait for standard probate, we are looking at 6 months. That kills the deal. We need a clean title by September 1st to process the lease. Is the sister going to be a problem? And Brooke's reply, sent 10 minutes later. Greg, do not worry about the sister. She's out of the picture. I am executing a transfer to an LLC to streamline the process. We will bypass the probate timeline. I am handling the signature risk internally. Just have the bonus check ready. Signature risk. There it was, in black and white. She hadn't just forged the deed. She had discussed the risk of the signature with the energy company. She had told them she was bypassing probate, and they hadn't asked questions. They had just asked for the title. They knew. I whispered. Dana nodded. This is it. Alice, this is the smoking gun. This proves premeditation. It proves conspiracy. This puts Sunvale on the hook. I stared at the screen. Is the sister going to be a problem? I wasn't a person to them. I was a signature risk. I was a speed bump on the road to a solar farm. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. It was a deep, quiet grief. I was mourning the death of my sister, not the physical death, but the death of the person I thought I knew. The sister I remembered playing tag with in the cornfields. The sister who had braided my hair before prom. She didn't exist. She had been replaced by this stranger who typed emails about handling me while our mother lay dying. I stood up and walked to the window of Dana's office. "Alice?" Dana asked. "Are you okay?" "I am fine," I said. My voice was steady. I need to make one more stop. I didn't go to Brooke. I went to Evan. I sent him a text message from the burner phone. I have the bank records. I have the emails with Sunvale. I know you signed the LLC papers. Meet me at the trailhead of Briar Creek Park in 30 minutes. Come alone, or I give everything to the sheriff tonight. I waited in my rental car at the park entrance. It was a gray, blustery afternoon. The park was empty, the swing sets creaking in the wind. Evan's truck pulled up 20 minutes later. He parked 2 spots away. He sat in his cab for a long time before getting out. When he walked toward me, he looked like a man marching to the gallows. He wore a puffy vest over a flannel shirt, the uniform of the successful Briar Glen husband, but he looked shrunken inside it. I rolled down my window. "Get in," I said. He walked around and climbed into the passenger seat. The car was warm, but he was shivering. "Alice," he said, "you shouldn't be contacting me," Brooke said. "Stop talking about what Brooke said." I cut him off. "Brooke is finished." "Evan," I handed him the folder. On top was the email about signature risk. Beneath it was the bank statement showing the transfers to the country club and the cabinet maker. "Look at it," I commanded. He picked up the papers. His hands shook so hard the paper rattled. He read the email. He flipped to the bank statement. He stared at the numbers. "She told me the money was for the farm." He whispered. "She said the tractor needed an overhaul. She said the roof on the barn was leaking. She spent $12,000 on cabinets. Evan, she spent $5,000 on country club dues. She stole my inheritance to pay for your lifestyle." He dropped the papers in his lap and put his head in his hands. "God," he moaned. "Oh God." He was crying. Not the polite, staged crying Brooke did in court. This was ugly. Messy sobbing. I knew. He choked out. I knew something was wrong. She was so intense, so angry all the time. She kept telling me we were on the edge, that if I didn't sign the papers, we would lose everything. She said I was a failure because I didn't make enough money. She said if I didn't help her fix this, she would leave me. She would take the house. She would tell everyone I was incompetent. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears. "She scares me. Alice, she has this way of twisting everything. If I ask a question, she turns it around until I'm apologizing for being stupid. I just wanted peace. I just wanted her to stop yelling." I looked at him. I didn't feel pity. I felt a cold, pragmatic assessment. Evan was weak. He was a victim of emotional abuse. Yes, but his weakness had allowed my mother to be victimized. He had signed the papers. He had stood by while the fence went up. "Evan," I said. My voice was hard. "Listen to me very carefully." He sniffled and looked at me. "This is going to criminal court. The forgery is proven. The fraud is documented. The bank is going to come for their money. Sunvale is going to sue for breach of contract. Brooke is going down." I leaned closer. "The only question is whether you go down with her." He flinched. "Me? I didn't know." "You signed the LLC formation documents." I said, "You are a member of Sanchez Ridge Holdings. Legally, you are complicit. If you stay silent, if you keep protecting her, you will be charged as a co-conspirator. You will lose your job. You will lose your reputation. You might go to jail." He turned white. "Alice, please." "But," I continued, "there is a way out." "What?" "Anything. I need a sworn affidavit." I said, "I need you to go to Dana's office and go on the record. I need you to state that Brooke directed the creation of the LLC. I need you to state that she told you the purpose was tax avoidance, not theft. I need you to provide the text messages she sent you, the ones where she threatened you, the ones where she rushed you." "I can't," he whispered. She will destroy me. She is already destroying you. Evan, I snapped. Look at yourself. You are hiding in a car with your sister-in-law because you are terrified of your wife. She has used you to commit a felony. She has spent the money on things you didn't even know about. She doesn't love you. She is using you as a shield. I took a breath. If you give me the affidavit, I will ask the prosecutor for leniency for you. I will frame you as a cooperating witness, a victim of spousal coercion. You can walk away. You can file for divorce. You can start over. But if you stick with her, I promise you, Evan, I will bury you both. He stared at me. He saw the change. He saw that the Alice who used to bake cookies and send birthday cards was gone. In her place was someone who had learned the rules of his wife's game. He looked down at the papers in his lap. He looked at the email where Brooke had called me a signature risk. She called me a failure, he said softly, last week, because I bought the wrong wine. He wiped his face with his sleeve. When do you need it? Tomorrow morning. I said, 9 a.m., Dana's office. He nodded. He opened the door. Alice? He said, pausing with one foot on the pavement. Yeah? I am sorry. About your mom. He got out and walked back to his truck. He didn't look back. I drove back to the hotel. I felt drained, empty. I had just dismantled my sister's marriage. I had just blackmailed my brother-in-law. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the phone. I had the strategy now. It was 2 tracks running parallel. Track 1, the legal victory, the affidavit from Evan, combined with the forensic report and the emails, would secure the judgment. We would void the deed. I would get the land. Track 2, the social execution. I wasn't just going to win in court. I was going to make sure that when the verdict came down, everyone in Briar Glen knew why. I called Talia Reed. Talia, I said, get your editor ready. You got the link? She asked. I got the emails. I said, and by tomorrow morning, I will have a sworn statement from the husband confirming the entire scheme. I could hear Talia typing furiously. This is front page. Alice, this is the biggest story in Lark County in 20 years. Hold it, I said. Do not run it yet. Why? You have everything. Because I want her to lie one more time. I said, there was a mediation session scheduled for Friday. Brooke had requested it, likely to try and lowball me into a settlement before the next hearing. I want her to sit in that room and lie to my face. I told Talia, I want her to put it on the record that she did nothing wrong. And then, when she is done, I want you to hit publish. Talia laughed. It was a dark, appreciative sound. You are cold. Sanchez. I learned from the best. I said, I hung up and lay back on the bed. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the heater. I thought about the 120 acres. I thought about the wind moving through the dry corn stalks. I thought about the silence of the winter fields. I was going to save the land. But I knew, with a heavy certainty, that I would never be able to look at it the same way again. It wasn't just soil anymore. It was a battlefield. And even when you win the war, the ground is full of shrapnel. I turned off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. Bring on the mediation. I was ready to watch her fall. The legal machinery ground forward. No longer a probate dispute, but a full-blown civil war. On Wednesday, Dana filed an amended complaint in the Circuit Court of Lark County. We were no longer just asking for the deed to be voided. We were adding counts of common law fraud, civil conspiracy, slander of title, and tortious interference with inheritance. It was an aggressive escalation. It was a statement that we weren't just looking for a correction. We were looking for damages. Brooke's response was immediate, but it didn't come in the form of a legal filing. It came as a settlement offer, delivered by courier to Dana's office on heavy, watermarked bond paper. I sat in the leather chair, reading the terms. Offer of compromise. The header read, Brooke was offering me the house in town, worth perhaps $250,000. She was offering me a cash payment of $50,000 from her personal savings, and she was offering to pay the estate's legal fees up to this point. In exchange, I would drop the lawsuit, sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the administrative errors in the filing, and crucially, Ratify the transfer of the 120 acres to Sanchez Ridge Holdings, LLC. She is trying to buy you off with your own money, Dana said, tossing her pen onto the desk. The house is already half yours. The $50,000 is a fraction of the signing bonus she's expecting from Sunvale. She keeps the land. She keeps the solar lease. And she keeps her reputation. It is insulting, I said, staring at the paper. It is calculated, Dana corrected. She is betting that you are tired. She is betting that you are broke. She is betting that the idea of walking away with a paid-off house and $50,000 looks better than 2 years of litigation. I looked at the signature line at the bottom, Brooke Sanchez. The signature was bold, confident, nothing like the shaky trace she had put on the deed. Tell her no, I said. Dana nodded. I will draft the rejection. But Alice, be prepared. When we turn this down, she loses the carrot. All she has left is the stick. That night, the silence in my mother's house was heavy enough to crush a person. The wind was howling around the eaves, a lonely prairie sound that rattled the loose storm window in the guest room. I sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of my childhood, the indent in the carpet where Mom's recliner used to be, the empty spot on the wall where her favorite painting had hung before Brooke took it for safekeeping. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion. Maybe I should take it. A treacherous voice whispered in my ear. If I took the deal, I could go back to Chicago. I could stop looking at legal documents. I could stop worrying about which of my neighbors was spying on me for my sister. I could buy a nice condo. I could pretend none of this happened. I missed my mother so much it was a physical ache in my chest. I wanted to call her. I wanted to hear her voice telling me it was okay to stop fighting. I wanted to be the daughter she remembered, the creative one, the gentle one. Instead, I was becoming something sharp and cold. I was becoming a woman who blackmailed her brother-in-law and plotted with reporters. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My reflection in the dark window looked pale. My eyes shadowed. Everyone in Briar Glen already knows you left and never came back. That was Brooke's weapon, the narrative. Even if I won the land back, I would always be the pariah. I would be the sister who sued the grieving executor. I would be the problem. I gripped the glass until my knuckles turned white. Let them talk, I said to the empty room. Let them hate me. If I took the deal, Brooke won. Not just the money, but the truth. She would get to write the history of this family. She would get to say that she saved the farm, that she was the hero, and that I was just a footnote that had to be paid off. I put the glass down. I wasn't fighting for popularity. I was fighting for the woman who had written, "Do not let Brooke rush you in a notebook," while her hands shook with fear. I wasn't going to let her down. Not again. The next morning, the ammunition arrived. Evan Mallory met us at Dana's office at 9 o'clock sharp. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled. He didn't look at me when he walked in. He just sat in the chair and stared at his hands. Dana had a court reporter present to transcribe the statement. "State your name for the record." Dana said, "Evan Mallory. Mr. Mallory, are you here of your own free will?" Evan let out a shuddering breath. Yes. He proceeded to lay it all out. It was pathetic, and it was damning. He described how Brooke had brought the papers home in late July, how she had told him that Mom was confused and that they needed to secure the asset before the state took it for medical bills. A lie, since Mom had excellent insurance. He described how she coached him. If anyone asks, say it is a tax shelter, say the lawyer recommended it, and then he handed over his phone. Dana plugged it into her computer and downloaded the text thread. It was brutal. August 12th, Brooke. Did you sign the LLC forms yet? Sunvale is pushing for the title check. I need this done by Friday or the bonus is gone. August 13th, Evan. I feel weird about this. Brooke, Alice isn't even here. Brooke, Alice is irrelevant. She's going to waste it anyway. Do you want to pay for the roof out of your salary? Sign the damn papers. Evan. August 30th, Brooke. Gary at the county confirmed the recording. We are clear. Do not speak to anyone about the dates. If Alice asks, the LLC was Mom's idea. I read the messages on the screen. Alice is irrelevant. That was it. That was the summary of our relationship. Thank you. Evan, I said quietly when he was finished. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears. Is she going to go to jail? He asked. That depends on the district attorney. Dana said, but with this, it is very likely she will face charges. You, however, are now a cooperating witness. We will make sure that is noted. Evan stood up. He looked lighter, as if he had vomited up a poison that had been killing him. I moved out yesterday, he said. I am staying at the motel by the highway. He walked to the door, then paused. She isn't who we thought she was. Alice, I don't think she ever was. I barely had time to process Evan's confession before my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a generic toll-free code. Alice Sanchez? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is Karen Miller from Human Resources at Prairie Line Agri Group. I froze. Prairie Line, Brooke's employer. Ms. Miller, I said. How can I help you? Ms. Sanchez, we have received a formal complaint from one of our employees, Brooke Sanchez, regarding harassment and stalking. She alleges that you have been contacting her colleagues and appearing at her workplace. I almost laughed. It was so brazen. Brooke knew the walls were closing in, so she was trying to preemptively frame my investigation as the obsession of a crazy woman. If she got fired later, she could claim it was because of my harassment, not her fraud. I have never been to your offices, Ms. Miller, I said, and I have never contacted her colleagues. We have a report that you have been inquiring about company contracts, Karen said, her voice stern. We take the safety of our employees very seriously. We would like you to come in for a meeting to discuss this before we involve law enforcement. I looked at Dana. She was listening on speakerphone. She nodded vigorously, a shark-like smile spreading across her face. I would be happy to come in, I said. I will be there at 2:00, and I will be bringing my attorney. The headquarters of Prairie Line Agri Group was a glass and steel monolith on the outskirts of Alder Point. It screamed corporate efficiency. We were escorted to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Karen Miller sat at the head of the table. She was a woman with a tight bun and a no-nonsense glare. Beside her sat a man in a gray suit. Corporate legal counsel, I assumed, Ms. Sanchez. Karen began. We simply want to establish boundaries. Your sister is a valued director here. Her productivity is suffering because of this. Family dispute, Dana repeated. She opened her briefcase. Is that what she told you? Ms. Hollis, the lawyer said, let us not play games. If your client continues to harass our employee, my client is investigating a felony committed using your company's resources. Dana cut in. Her voice was calm, but it carried across the room like a whip crack. The room went silent. Excuse me? Karen said. Dana slid a single piece of paper across the polished table. It was the LLC organizer page from the Secretary of State. This is the formation document for Sanchez Ridge Holdings. LLC, Dana said, the entity that received stolen property, specifically 120 acres of land fraudulently transferred from the estate of Elena Sanchez. She pointed to a line on the document. The organizer of this shell company is Kendra Voss. Karen picked up the paper. She frowned. Kendra is Brooke's assistant. Correct, Dana said. And here's a bank record showing a $10,000 payment from that fraudulent LLC to Kendra Voss. Dana slid the second paper across. And here, she continued, relentlessly, is an email chain between Brooke Sanchez, Kendra Voss, and Greg Prentice of Sunvale Renewables, a partner of yours, I believe, discussing how to bypass probate to secure a signing bonus. The corporate lawyer snatched the papers from Karen's hand. He read the email. His face went from bored to ashen in 3 seconds. Ms. Sanchez used her subordinate to facilitate property theft. Dana said, she used her corporate email to coordinate it, and she used your business partner, Sunvale, to monetize it. Dana leaned back. So, you can call the police on Alice for stalking, but I suggest you call your compliance officer instead, because right now, Prairie Line Agri Group is looking like a co-conspirator in a massive real estate fraud. The silence in the room was absolute. The hum of the air conditioning sounded like a jet engine. Karen Miller looked at the lawyer. The lawyer looked at the papers. "We need a moment," the lawyer said. His voice was tight. "Take your time," Dana said. "We will show ourselves out." As we walked to the elevator, I glanced back. Karen Miller was already on the phone, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. Brooke had tried to use HR as a shield. Instead, she had just walked herself into a firing squad. I sat in the car with Dana, the adrenaline slowly fading into a dull throb. That was the kill shot for her career, I said. Dana nodded. "They will suspend her within the hour. They have to. The liability is too high." My phone buzzed. It was Talia Reed. Text. "I heard a rumor that the sheriff was just seen entering the county records office. What is happening?" I texted back. "Not yet. Wait for the mediation." Talia. "You are playing with fire." Alice. Me. "I am just watching it burn." I put the phone away. I knew Talia was right. Holding the story was risky. But I needed one more thing. I needed Brooke to look me in the eye and lie. I needed to see her break. The mediation was scheduled for Friday morning at a neutral law office in town. It was a formality, really. A box the court required us to check before the full trial. Brooke arrived 10 minutes late. She walked in with Marcus Thorne, her attorney. She looked different today. The polished, grieving sister act was fraying at the edges. Her makeup was a little too heavy, hiding dark circles. Her hands, usually perfectly manicured and still, were picking at the cuff of her blouse. We sat on opposite sides of a long oak table. The mediator, a retired judge named Henderson, sat at the head. "Let us try to find some common ground." Henderson said, "This is a family matter. Surely we can resolve this without further litigation." Brooke cleared her throat. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but it looked rehearsed. "Alice," she said. Her voice wavered. "I know you are angry. I know you think I did something wrong. But everything I did was to save Mom's legacy. The estate was in trouble. I took on that burden so you didn't have to." She reached across the table. Palm up. "I just want my sister back. I want us to heal. Please, take the settlement. Let us end this. It was a good performance." If I hadn't read the emails where she called me irrelevant, I might have believed her. I looked at her hand. I didn't take it. Dana spoke. Her voice was ice. "We are not here to heal. Ms. Sanchez, we are here to clarify the record." Marcus Thorne sighed. "We have offered a generous settlement. If you are going to be obstructionist—" "We are not being obstructionist," Dana said. "We are being thorough. For example, we want to clarify the timeline of the deed filing." She pulled a folder from her briefcase. "Brooke, you claimed in your deposition that you mailed the deed to the county. Is that correct?" Brooke blinked. "Yes, I mailed it." Dana pulled out a photograph. It was the grainy image Melanie Cross had sent me. The man in the leather jacket, the cash envelope, Gary Thorne laughing. "Then can you explain why the security footage from the recorder's office shows a courier handing the deed directly to Supervisor Gary Thorne at 1:42 p.m. on August 14th, along with a cash payment?" Brooke's hand froze in midair. She stared at the photo. I don't know what that is," she stammered. Her hand dropped to the table. It started to tremble. A fine, high-frequency shake she couldn't control. Marcus Thorne leaned forward, squinting at the photo. "Where did you get this?" "It doesn't matter," Dana said. "What matters is that Gary Thorne seems to recall the incident quite clearly." She paused for effect. "We subpoenaed Mr. Thorne yesterday, and, interestingly enough, he filed his letter of resignation this morning." Brooke made a sound, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a sob caught in her throat. Her face went gray. "Gary resigned?" she whispered. "He did," Dana said. "And generally, innocent public servants do not resign 24 hours after receiving a subpoena. It suggests consciousness of guilt." Brooke looked at Marcus Thorne. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "Help me." Her expression screamed. Marcus closed his file. He looked at the photo, then at his client. He realized in that moment, that she had lied to him too. "We need a recess," Marcus said abruptly. He grabbed Brooke by the arm and practically dragged her out of the room. I sat there, watching the empty doorway. I felt a cold satisfaction. She knew. She knew the walls weren't just closing in. They had already crushed her. Gary was gone. The bank records were out. Evan had flipped. She was alone. 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. It wasn't Brooke. It was my Aunt Sarah. Then my cousin Mike. Then a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "Alice, what are you doing to your sister? Brooke says you are trying to bankrupt the family. Stop this. Alice?" Mom would be ashamed. I looked at the messages. Brooke was in the hallway, cornered, and her reaction was to lash out one last time. She was texting the family, trying to burn my reputation to the ground before the truth came out. She was using the family as human shields. I felt a surge of rage, but I pushed it down. I didn't type a defense. I didn't argue. I opened the file on my phone labeled The Truth. It contained 3 PDFs. The forensic handwriting report concluding the signature was a forgery, the bank statement showing the $12,000 spent on cabinets, the LLC organizer page listing Kendra Voss. I selected the group chat that included every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the Sanchez family. I attached the file. I wrote one sentence. "Brooke is lying. Here is the proof. Please read before you text me again." I hit send. I watched the read receipts populate, one by one. Then, the 3 dots of someone typing appeared. Then they disappeared. Then, silence. Absolute, total silence. No one replied. No one defended her. No one attacked me. The evidence was too stark, too gross. You can explain away a misunderstanding. You cannot explain away spending estate money on kitchen renovations while claiming poverty. The silence was the sound of Brooke's social capital evaporating. We left the mediation without a deal. Marcus Thorne had looked pale when he returned, muttering that his client needed time to consider her position. I drove Dana back to her office. "What now?" I asked. "Now we finish it." Dana said, "She's on the ropes. She will try to settle again tomorrow. She will offer you the moon. She will offer you the land, the money, everything, as long as you sign a confidentiality agreement." She looked at me. "Do you want to sign it?" I thought about the text messages from my family. I thought about the whispers in the coffee shop. I thought about the way Brooke had looked at me for 30 years, like I was something small to be managed. If I sign a confidentiality agreement, the town never knows. I said, "She keeps her status. She spins a story that she gifted me the land out of the kindness of her heart." "Exactly," Dana said. I shook my head. "No." I said, "I want the judgment. I want the judge to bang the gavel and say the word fraud on the record. I want it in the court transcripts. I want it in the newspaper." Dana smiled. "Then we go to the hearing on Monday, and we bring the reporter." I dropped Dana off and drove to the edge of town, to the farm. The sun was setting, casting long purple shadows across the stubble of the cornfield. The yellow gate was still there, locked and imposing. I got out of the car and walked up to the bars. I gripped the cold steel. I wasn't just taking the land back. I was taking the silence back. I pulled out my phone and called Talia Reed. "Run it," I said. "Are you sure?" Talia asked. "I am sure. Run the story. Run the bank records. Run the emails." I hung up. Tomorrow morning, the Briar Glen Sentinel would hit every driveway in town. Tomorrow morning, the neighbors would open their papers and see Brooke's name connected to forgery, embezzlement, and elder abuse. There would be no spinning this. There would be no family healing speech. I looked out at the darkening field. "You wanted to handle it, Brooke," I whispered. "It is handled." I turned and walked back to the car. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the bridge I was burning, and it kept me warm. Monday morning in the Lark County Circuit Court felt less like a legal proceeding and more like an autopsy. The air was sterile, cold, and smelled faintly of the floor wax used to buff the linoleum of the aisle. The gallery was fuller than it had been for the initial hearing. In a small town, silence travels faster than noise, and the silence from my family group chat had rippled outward, alerting the community that the Sanchez sisters were about to have their final collision. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting on a stack of files that contained the dissection of my sister's life. Dana Hollis sat beside me, radiating the calm, predatory focus of a shark in deep water. Across the aisle, Brooke sat alone with Marcus Thorne. Evan was not there. His absence was a gaping hole in her defense, a visible fracture in the image of the united, perfect family she had tried to sell to the judge. Brooke looked impeccable, as always, a navy sheath dress, pearls, hair swept back, but there was a tension in her neck, a tightness in the way she gripped her pen, that betrayed her. She looked like a porcelain vase that had been glued back together, waiting for the vibration that would shatter it for good. Judge Vance entered, his robe swirling around him. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had received phone calls over the weekend that he did not want to take. "Ready, Ms. Hollis?" the judge asked. "Ready, Your Honor," Dana said. She stood up. She did not use big words. She did not use theatrical gestures. She simply began to build a wall, brick by brick, around my sister. "Your Honor," Dana began, "we are here to determine the validity of a quitclaim deed dated August 14th, but to understand the deed, we must understand the desperation that created it." She placed the first exhibit on the projector. It was the forensic handwriting report. Exhibit A, Dana said, the analysis of the signature, confirmed as a simulation, a tracing. Alice Sanchez was 150 miles away in Chicago when this document was allegedly signed. She placed the second exhibit, the security photo from Melanie Cross, Exhibit B. She continued, security footage from the county recorder's office. It shows a courier delivering the deed directly to Supervisor Gary Thorne, bypassing standard intake protocols. It shows a cash transaction occurring at the counter. Brooke flinched. It was small, just a twitch of her shoulder. But I saw it. Dana didn't stop. "Exhibit C," she said, slapping the bank records down. The financial motive, $180,000 drawn against a fraudulent line of credit. Funds used not for the estate, but for personal luxury expenditures by the defendant. Brooke Sanchez, Exhibit D, the LLC formation documents, listing Kendra Voss, the defendant's subordinate, as the organizer, and finally, Dana said, her voice dropping an octave, Exhibit E, the sworn affidavit of Evan Mallory, the defendant's husband. A murmur went through the gallery. Brooke turned her head sharply, looking at the empty door as if expecting Evan to walk in and recant. "In this statement," Dana said, "Mr. Mallory confirms that he was directed by his wife to sign LLC documents under false pretenses. He confirms that the defendant explicitly stated her intent to bypass probate to secure a signing bonus from Sunvale Renewables, and he provides text messages." Dana projected the text on the screen. The letters were 5 feet high, glowing in the dim courtroom. "Alice is irrelevant. She is going to waste it anyway." I looked at the screen. Seeing it that big, that undeniable, felt like a physical blow, but it also felt like armor. It was the truth, finally stripped of all the family healing rhetoric. Dana turned to the judge. "This was not a misunderstanding, Your Honor. This was a conspiracy. It was a calculated theft involving forgery, bribery of a public official, and the exploitation of a dying woman's estate. We ask that the deed be declared void ab initio, and given the severity of the evidence, we ask for a referral to the state's attorney for criminal review." Dana sat down. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Judge Vance looked at Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne?" Marcus Thorne stood up slowly. He looked at the mountain of evidence. He looked at his client, who was staring straight ahead with glassy eyes. He knew he had lost. He knew that arguing now would only damage his own reputation. "Your Honor," Thorne said, his voice flat, "we have no counter-evidence to present regarding the signature." Brooke whipped her head around to look at him, her mouth opening in shock. Thorne didn't look back. He sat down. Judge Vance nodded. He picked up his gavel. It felt like he was holding a hammer meant to break bone. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, the court finds the quitclaim deed recorded on August 14th to be fraudulent and void. The judge ruled, title to the property at parcel 0429 is restored to the estate of Elena Sanchez. He paused, looking over his spectacles at Brooke. Furthermore, due to the implications of public corruption and fraud, I am referring the entire file, including the affidavit of Mr. Mallory and the evidence regarding Mr. Thorne at the recorder's office, to the district attorney for immediate investigation. He banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. The sound rang out like a gunshot. I watched Brooke. I expected tears. I expected her to crumble, to finally show the fear that any normal person would feel as their life disintegrated, but she didn't cry. She went eerily calm. Her spine straightened. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. They were cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. She turned to Marcus Thorne. "This is your fault," she hissed, loud enough for me to hear. "You let them ambush us. You should have suppressed the husband's statement." Thorne began to pack his briefcase. "Brooke, there was nothing to suppress. It was the truth." Brooke stood up. She smoothed her dress. She looked around the courtroom, her gaze landing on me. There was no remorse in her face. There was only annoyance. If Gary hadn't panicked and resigned, this would have held, she said, her voice a low monotone. He was weak. He folded the second they subpoenaed him. She looked at Dana and Evan. Evan is a coward. He never understood the big picture. He just wanted to be safe. Then, she looked at the empty judge's bench. "And Mom," she muttered, shaking her head. If Mom had just been reasonable in July, if she hadn't been so stubborn about fairness, I wouldn't have had to do any of this. She forced my hand. I felt a chill run down my spine. She wasn't sorry. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. In her mind, she was the victim of incompetent accomplices and a stubborn mother. She had rewritten the reality in real time to protect her ego. She wasn't a criminal. She was a manager surrounded by incompetent staff. She walked past me without stopping. She didn't look at me. She walked out of the courtroom with her head high, marching toward a cliff she refused to believe was there. The fallout was not a slow burn. It was an explosion. By the time I got back to the hotel, my phone was lighting up with news alerts. Prairie Line Agri Group executive suspended amidst fraud investigation. Karen Miller at HR had not waited. The moment the judge referred the case to the DA, Prairie Line cut the cord. They issued a statement distancing themselves from the personal actions of Miss Sanchez and announcing an internal audit of all land deals involving the Land Legacy Division. Kendra Voss was suspended without pay an hour later. I heard from a friend of a friend that Kendra was already looking for a lawyer, ready to trade testimony against Brooke for immunity, but the real blow came the next morning. I walked to the diner to get coffee. On every table, beside the ketchup bottles and napkin dispensers, lay a copy of the Briar Glen Sentinel. The headline took up the entire top fold. "Sold Down the River: How a Local Fraud Network Stole Land from the Dying." Talia Reid had done exactly what I asked. She hadn't just written about Brooke. She had written about the system. She named Gary Thorne. She named the bank officers who waived appraisals. She named the consultants who took fees for doing nothing. But my case was the centerpiece. There were photos of the documents, the forged signature next to the real one, the email from Sunvale asking about the signature risk. I sat in a booth and watched the town read it. I saw old farmers putting on their reading glasses, frowning as they read about the soil they respected being traded like poker chips. I saw the church ladies whispering, pointing at the picture of Brooke, the narrative Brooke had built. The saintly sister, the responsible executive, wasn't just damaged. It was vaporized. It is one thing to be rumored to be greedy. It is another to be documented stealing from your dying mother to pay for kitchen cabinets. That afternoon, I saw the second legal filing on the court docket. Mallory v. Sanchez. Evan had filed for legal separation. It wasn't a dramatic filing. It was quiet, bureaucratic, and final. He cited Irreconcilable differences. But the subtext was clear. He was getting off the sinking ship. He was trying to salvage his own small life from the wreckage of his wife's ambition. Brooke's perfect marriage, the shield she used to make me feel inadequate, the proof of her stability, was gone. I sat in my mother's living room that evening, surrounded by the silence of the house. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had done everything I set out to do. But victory didn't feel like happiness. It felt like exhaustion. It felt like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. I looked at the deed on the table. The judge's order had restored it to the estate. The land was mine. Half mine, technically. But with Brooke facing felony charges and bankruptcy, I would control the disposition. I could sell it. Sunvale would probably still pay a fortune, even without the bonus. I could take the money and go back to Chicago and never think about Briar Glen again. But then I thought about the yellow gate. I thought about the energy people walking the lines. I thought about Mom walking those fields until her hips gave out. If I sold it, I was just finishing what Brooke started. Only legally. I picked up my pen. I had one more signature to execute. I met with the directors of the Sanchez Prairie Conservation Trust on Wednesday. It was a small nonprofit based in Alder Point, a group of ecologists and lawyers dedicated to preserving the vanishing tallgrass prairie of Illinois. I laid the map on the table. 120 acres. I want to place it in a permanent easement, I said. The director, a woman with gray braids and kind eyes, looked at me. You understand what this means, Alice? You retain ownership, but you forfeit the development rights. You can never build subdivisions. You can never install a solar farm. You can never mine it. The value of the land will drop by 70%. I understand. I said, and you cannot undo it. She added, it runs with the land, forever. I looked at the map. I saw the creek where I learned to swim. I saw the tree line where Mom used to watch the birds. It stops the solar company? I asked, dead in its tracks. She said, they can't lease land that has a conservation easement prohibiting industrial structures, and it stops. Family members from leveraging it? She nodded. It becomes a protected asset. It is no longer a financial weapon. It is just land. I uncapped my pen. This time, my hand didn't shake. I signed my name, Alice Sanchez. The A was crossed with a sharp upward flick. It was done. I had locked the gate, not to keep people out, but to keep the greed out. I had ensured that no matter what happened to me, no matter what happened to Brooke, the land would simply be. I was walking out of the lawyer's office, the signed trust documents in my bag. When I saw her, Brooke was leaning against my rental car. She looked smaller. The perfectly tailored dress was replaced by jeans and a sweater that looked like it had been pulled from the laundry hamper. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her face was pale, stripped of the armor she usually wore. I stopped 10 feet away. Alice, she said. I didn't answer. I just waited. I lost my job. She said, I know. Evan is staying at a motel. He won't answer my calls. I know. I said again. She pushed off the car and took a step toward me. Her eyes were frantic, darting around the parking lot to see if anyone was watching. You have to stop this. Alice, you made your point. You won. But the article, the investigation. It is too much. You are destroying my life. You destroyed your life, Brooke, I said calmly. I just turned on the lights. She shook her head. A desperate, jerky motion. I can fix it, she said. I can talk to Sunvale. I can get them to drop the breach of contract suit. But you have to tell the reporter to retract the story. Tell her you got it wrong. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. If you undo the article damage, I will stop fighting you on the probate. I will let you have the house. I stared at her. I actually laughed. It was a short, dry sound. She still didn't get it. She was standing in the rubble of her existence, facing criminal charges, and she was still trying to negotiate. She still thought everything was a transaction. She thought truth was something you could trade for a house. Brooke, I said, the land is gone. What? I just put it into a conservation trust. It can never be developed. Sunvale can't touch it. You can't touch it. It is just grass and dirt now, forever. Her mouth fell open. You? You threw away the money? You threw away millions? I didn't throw it away, I said. I saved it. She stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the look of someone who sees a language they cannot speak, a value system they cannot comprehend. You are stupid, she spat. You were always stupid and small. You think this makes you noble? It just makes you broke. I took a step closer to her. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The monster under the bed was just a sad, angry woman in a parking lot. You didn't lose because I am cruel. Brooke, I said softly, and you didn't lose because I'm stupid. I looked her dead in the eye. You lost because you thought I would stay small. You thought I would be the quiet little sister who would roll over and let you take everything because I was afraid of a scene. I opened my car door. You forgot that I am Mom's daughter too, and she told me not to let you rush me. I got in the car. Brooke stood there, her mouth working, trying to find the words, the threat, the leverage that would put her back in control. But there was nothing left. Her pockets were empty. I started the engine and drove away, leaving her standing alone on the asphalt. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I wasn't made of stone. It hurt. It hurt to see my sister like that. It hurt to know that I was the one who had swung the hammer. But as I drove past the city limits, the shaking stopped. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a surgeon who has cut out the rot. It leaves a scar, but the patient survives. I went to the farm one last time before heading back to Chicago. It was dusk. The sky was a bruised purple, fading into the black of night. The wind was cutting across the fields, whistling through the dry stalks of the winter cover crop. I walked up to the yellow gate. I took the bolt cutters I had bought at the hardware store and snapped the padlock. It fell into the dirt with a heavy thud. I pushed the gate open. It groaned on its hinges. I walked into the field. The ground was hard and uneven under my boots. I walked until I reached the center of the section, far away from the road, far away from the town. I stood there and listened. I could hear the highway in the distance, a low hum. I could hear a dog barking miles away. I could hear the wind. I closed my eyes. I felt a profound sense of loss. I had lost my mother. I had lost my sister. I had lost the version of my hometown that lived in my nostalgia. But I felt something else, too. I felt the ground beneath my feet. It was solid. It was real. It wasn't an asset. It wasn't a liability. It was just earth. I had kept my promise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. I expected it to be Dana, or Talia, or maybe Evan, but the screen said unknown number. I hesitated. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I answered, "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Not the silence of a disconnect, the silence of a presence. I could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of breathing. It was slow, controlled, deliberate. I didn't speak. I just listened to the breathing. It lasted for 10 seconds. Then, there was a soft click, and the line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked out at the dark horizon. Brooke wasn't finished. She was down. She was broken. She was facing indictment, but she wasn't finished. Someone like Brooke never stops. They just recalibrate. She would spend the next 10 years blaming me, plotting, waiting for a moment of weakness. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Let her plan. Let her wait. I wasn't the girl who ran away to Chicago anymore. I was the woman who had burned the map and salted the earth. I turned my collar up against the cold. The wind was biting, but the air was clean. I walked back toward the car, my boots crunching on the frozen ground. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The land was there, and it wasn't going anywhere, and for the first time in a long time, neither was I. Thank you so much for listening to My Sister Claimed My Land Was Hers, so I took her marriage, career, and reputation. It has been a journey through the dark side of family loyalty and small-town justice. I would love to hear your thoughts on Alice's decision. Did she go too far with the trust? Or was it the only way to truly stop Brooke? And who do you think was on the phone at the end? Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. Until next time, watch your signatures and never underestimate the quiet ones.